So God is about love. God is about laughter. And our 8-year-old boy, one of the twins, when he was 4, he said, "Dad, laugh more than laugh." And I asked him, "Isaac, what does that mean, laugh more than laugh?" And he said, "You know, Dad, people just don't laugh enough. We gotta laugh more." And so this brings so many smiles to us, and we have to learn how to laugh more. Children smile over 100 times a day, according to some studies, and adults only smile about 20 plus times a day. So there's something wrong with that formula. Someone here earlier told me that they're still finding out when they were going to grow up, right? And so that child within us is so important. But since we are in a pulpit in a church, I want to tell you a story that is very private. And I've only publicly told this story just a few times. And I was studying in Dallas, at the University of Dallas in Irving, Texas, across the street from the old Texas Stadium. And my parents lived in Pasadena, Texas. So I came to visit them one break that we had, and it was a Saturday morning. I looked in the phone book because the internet didn't exist at that time, and I looked for an Assemblies of God church. This is a church I was going to. I was recently presented to Jesus, although I grew up Catholic. You know, it's a different story, right? When you have him in your heart and you experience him. And so I looked in the phone book. I saw a number of Assemblies of God churches. I picked one out. I called to see what time the service will be on Sunday. And they said, "Oh, you're calling because tonight, Saturday night, we have a special service. We have a guest minister coming in, and please come tonight for this special event." So they gave me the address. I got my map and figured out how to get there. I don't know who I spoke to. I didn't identify myself to the person on the phone, how I looked, how I was dressed, or anything. So I came to this church. I was kind of shy. I'm shy by nature. And I walked in. It was a church similar to this, a lot bigger. There was about over 1,000 people in the church. I walked down the middle aisle. I sat towards the back on your right side, on your left side. And sure enough, it was a special event. They had flowers everywhere, and it was decked out, as we say in New Jersey. And I sat back there. The service started, and the guest preacher, she made an altar call. And Shy Tony, first time in this church, was the first one to get up. And I was about 4 people inside from the aisle. I'm like, excuse me. So I'm walking down the middle aisle to the front of the church. I was the first one. And I'm like, "Tony, sit down." I'm thinking this in my mind, "Sit down, what are you doing?" But I felt like the Holy Spirit was pushing me to the front of the church. And so, of course, I kept on going, right? I couldn't resist. So I get up to the front of the church, I close my eyes, and I'm praying. Every once in a while, kind of looking around what's happening, and of course, more people are coming up to the front, to the point where you're just, crammed in there. There's so many people there. So this guest preacher woman, long curly hair, who later on I saw her on TV. I don't remember her name. She started speaking in tongues. And then she said, "There's someone here who's going to do great things in medicine, but it's not in this country." And I know in Texas, you think that this is a country, right? So she said he's going to travel the world. He's going to treat royal family. He's going to treat kings and famous people, but it's not in this country. And he will have a healing center where many will come to find health and healing and find Jesus. But it's not in this country. As she's saying all this, I'm thinking, I'm already a doctor. I'm not in this country, doing my medicine. So maybe it's me. Nah, it can't be me. There's so many people here. Sort of like, I love you not kind of thing. And as she said more and more, many other things, and then she said, and it's that young man there. And she pointed in my direction, but I still didn't think it was me. And she said, yes, you with the blue shirt. So I looked, and I had a blue shirt. And I said, me? Yes, you. So she said to everyone, let's extend our hand, and let's pray for him, and let's bless him. And since that day, I've traveled the world. I've treated many people. I've renewed vows. We've baptized patients that have come to our clinic, because both of our clinics are across the street from the ocean. How convenient, right? To baptize them. We've baptized staff members. So I tell you this story not to pat myself on the back by any means, but just as an example of how the Lord has intervened in what we do. And He's watching over us. And we just have to pray for Him to continue to give us wisdom, discernment, and to lead us into what's the best treatment for a patient. Oftentimes I have two patients with breast cancer, let's say, and I recommend one therapy for one patient and a different therapy for another patient. So they find out because they're talking amongst themselves at the clinic, and so they ask me, Dr. Tony, well, Betty is getting a different therapy than I am, or I'm not taking that, why am I not taking that and she is? And I tell them the truth. The truth is, as a physician, as a doctor, as a scientist, we don't know everything. There's more that we don't know than we know. But when we have the great physician, we know more than we know. I'm starting to sound like Donald Rumsfeld. So we know more. And so we need to trust, as Marcy said, we need to trust that Holy Spirit. Some people call it intuition. However we want to call it, we need to trust that in making your decisions as to what to do in your life. And not only about medicine. Oftentimes we hear that someone told, it's like something's telling me I shouldn't go to the store now. Or something's telling me this. Well, that something is the Holy Spirit. Right? And so it plays a big part of me in my treatments and what we recommend to patients. So it's good when we know that as believers, we have a God that's all loving, all caring, and if we are in that space, in that energy, great things happen. And that's why Lucinda can come up and play the piano like never before. This is why Whitney has a child now. This is why Ted, who we prayed for last night, he's not dead. Right? And he's not dying. He's living, and he's alive. And this is why many more will find health, whether they come to Hope for Cancer or not. So we talked about laughter, and just to break this up a little bit, let's all laugh. So in between our front lip and our teeth, there's an acupuncture point. And if we put our tongue in that space, and we could all do it, and it's okay, we could all do it. I did this in front of millions of people on The Truth About Cancer, documentary series. And so let's do this quickly. We could put our tongue in between our front lip and our front teeth, and look up so no one, your neighbor cannot see you because you'll seem a little ridiculous. But laughter stimulates the immune system. It stimulates learning. It deters the cancer cells from, progressing and doing their thing. And it's relaxing, and it'll keep you awake for the rest of my talk on mind over matter. So let's do that. Put our tongue there, look up, and let's just laugh. So you can keep on going if you want, but it's a powerful exercise, and the ones that didn't do it, you're too serious. Relax, right? Relax. So laugh more than laugh. We'll talk about mind over matter. Can emotions affect our well-being? Can emotions affect us from getting cancer? And of course, the answer to that is yes. We have many types of emotions, and emotions are fine, because who gave us these emotions? The Lord gave us these emotions. So what causes cancer or chronic diseases? We talked about some of these: lifestyle, genes, toxins, microbes, nutritional factors, pharmaceutical drugs, radiation. But what about the mind and emotions? Stressors cause changes in the health status. Traumatic stressors, like accidents, right, broken bones, physical, psycho-spiritual. I went to Colombia years ago. I was single, and this family wanted me to marry their daughter, but it was just not going to happen. And they did everything possible to make this happen, but I fled as soon as I could. I get back home, and I'm driving, and I would see different animals crossing the road, and I would slam on my brakes to not hit the animal, but there was no animals. I would feel lightheaded, weird, and this went on for a month. And I said, oh, I have to do some blood tests, I have to do some studies and see if there's something more to this. And everything was perfectly normal. So I went to a church, and I had the minister pray for me and repel these evil spirits. So there is a dark side that we know, right? And that dark side will always try to suppress us from knowledge, from making decisions, and increasing our stress, thereby decreasing our health. So, however it's affecting you, seek that. Seek that emotional and mental health. In the ancient times, when someone went to a health facility like in Greece and in Egypt, the first person they saw was Jeff, the spiritual advisor. Then they saw the emotional, kind of the psychologist, to look at the mental aspect. And at the end, by the bathroom, it was the doctor. So they looked at health from the spiritual, then the emotional, and then the physical. Nowadays in health, that's totally reversed, and it's all about the body. They forget about the mind, and they forget about the spiritual, right? So now we're going to talk about those two other areas that are not addressed as they should. And the question is it all in the mind? Napoleon Hill said, thoughts are things. Thoughts have energy, thoughts have a vibration, thoughts have a resonance, thoughts have information. A negative thought, as I said before, can kill you faster than a bad germ. This was said centuries ago when there weren't any antibiotics. And so a bad germ was a bad thing, right? It killed people. And even at that time, they thought that a negative thought was even more dangerous for your health than a bad germ. And as we see this figure here, it's all connected. The physical, the sexual, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. And what that means is that we should assess ourselves in our lives. And a little exercise we could do with this is, let's grade ourselves. How are we in these areas. So for example, myself, we'll grade ourselves from 1 to 10, 10 being awesome, and 1 being very poor. So physically, I would rate my health, as an example, maybe an 8.5, because there's things that I need to improve on, right, for my health. Sexually, well, 10 plus, right? Emotionally, I would say I'm about a 9. Intellectually, maybe a 7. And spiritually, maybe a 7 also. So I look at those and I see what the lowest number was. It surely wasn't sexual, and that's a joke, no. And so let's say it was intellectual, my lowest number. So now for the next month, I work on that. I work on that intellectual area. So does that mean, not going to Facebook too much and reading more of the Bible, or more books, or engaging in conversation with my wife or my friends? Whatever that is to increase my intellectual aspect of my connectedness. And so I work on that, and in a month, I reassess myself objectively again and see how that shifted. Maybe, getting too much in the books, now it's affecting my sexual life, because instead of, you're reading, right? So, and see, we could say that in a church, right? Because oftentimes in a church, they don't want to talk about the sexual health, but this is something given to us by God, and it's very important for health as well. So then I see what I have to work on. So it's a constant effort, a good effort, to have that balance that we talk about, that homeostasis, that equilibrium. And then I do that with my spouse. How are we as a couple in these areas? How are we together spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, sexually, and physically? And then as a couple, we work on those areas as well. And I know that many couples that come to the clinic for treatment, either the husband or the wife is the patient, and they're not good. They're not good. They're in toxic relationships. Their lifestyle back home is poor. And so they come to Hope for Cancer, they're doing well, and then 3 months later, they come back for a checkup, and they're not improving as much as we want. And we come to find out that how could they? They go back to a situation where there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of stress, a lot of anger, resentment in the family structure. And so these intangibles are so important. It's not about the Sonofoto, the Rigvir, and all the Sunivero by itself. It's about the whole thing. And this gives us some area to focus on in addition to the treatments. Okay? So please pay close attention to this. And those of you that don't have cancer in this room, we need to work on this too. Because after today's done, the first thing that I would ask you is to not go into FTI, failure to implement. How often do we get educated, we learn things, and then it's easy to go back to our habits and not change anything, right? So FTI, failure to implement, is the biggest reason why we're not as healthy as we should be. And we make those New Year's resolutions, right? And how many of those are kept? So, of course, the spirit is above all. And then we have the psychic, mind, and consciousness. And this is where our emotions are. We're not talking about psyche as like the psyche or, like a crystal ball thing. It's our mind, our consciousness. This is where our emotions are, our personalities, our experiences, also our conditioning, even our religious beliefs. This is in our psyche. And then in the brain, the automatic brain, anyone know what the biological function of the brain is? It's a word that starts with S. S as in Sam. What's the function of the brain biologically? So if a tiger is chasing you, what is the function of the brain? Survival, right? The function of the brain is to survive. And that information then is passed on to the physical body to respond. So if we have these traumas and these conflicts in our brain, in the traumas and conflicts, and that information is sent to the brain and then to the body, this is negative information. The brain is trying to survive, but it's overpowered, and then cancer and disease develops. Okay? So this is just a general area to remember, is that conflicts and traumas are the leading cause of disease. And this is coming from a doctor. We are honored to have an internal medicine doctor here who after that went to get a degree in nutrition and now does a lot of functional medicine in this local area. Doctor, can you please stand up and so we could recognize him? And yes. I just met him in the lunch break. Lisa introduced me to him, and this is a medical doctor, conventionally trained internal medicine specialist who went outside the box and is doing wonderful things for patients. So there are doctors that understand this and get this, and if you need labs or CAT scans or anything, he could order that, right? Prescription. So the trajectory of our felt experience is from the psychic or the spirit, the brain, and then the body. And we're going to break this down a little bit. So an example, a patient, Phyllis, Ryke breast cancer from San Diego area. She comes to us at the age of 63 years of age with, as I said, Ryke breast cancer. So we're treating her, and she's doing well, working full-time as a school teacher, no real, quality of life issues, but that tumor is still there. That lump on the right breast is still there. No matter what therapies we did, that tumor was still there. So then I start working and learning about all this stuff, and I engage in conversation with Phyllis, who's a school teacher, and I asked her, Phyllis, tell me about your school. Is there child abuse in the school? Is there sexual abuse? Tell me about this. As I'm asking her these questions, because the Lord had given me like some insight that maybe Phyllis had something going on with abuse in her life. And so Phyllis turns white, she starts to sweat, starts to shake. I calmed her down, loved on her, and she said, Dr. Tony, when I was 10 years old, I was sexually abused by my father, my grandfather, and my uncle. That was 50 years before she was diagnosed with right breast cancer. The right side is the male side. Everyone who has right breast cancer has a significant traumatic experience with a male. So, now knowing this, they knew, the father, the grandfather, and the uncle. Phyllis knew, and now I knew. And I helped Phyllis process this. I helped Phyllis understand this. And ultimately, I helped Phyllis let it go. When she let this go, what do you think happened to that tumor that we couldn't remove for 2+ years? As you said, it was gone. I don't understand all of this, but I've seen it many, many, many times with leukemia, prostate cancer, colon cancer, thyroid cancer, breast cancer, you name it. Every cancer has a biological significance. And these are traumas and conflicts that go from the psychic, the spirit, to the brain, to the body, and manifest as a cancer. The automatic brain receives normal impulses, right? Really nice flowing, and that's healthy for us. When it receives chaotic, traumatic impulses, this is what happens. The brain is facing potentially catastrophic emotional trauma. Right? And behind this, these hidden impulses, it creates long-term triggers that cause physical and psychological stress and ultimately disease. Another story, my mom, when I left for college, we lived in New Jersey. I went to college, as I told you, in Dallas, and she followed us and moved to me, and she moved as close to Dallas as she could at that time, which was Pasadena. So every day that I did not call my mom, she would say the next call, she wanted me to call her every day. The day that I didn't call her, the next day, she would say, son, how could you do this to me? Don't you know that I love you, I care for you, are you abandoning me? Why didn't you call me yesterday? So it was like, I love you, Mom, I'm calling you just to talk to you. But for her, she wanted me to call her every day. So I went through college, I went to medical school, internship, all this, and it was the same story. I had to call my mom every day, because the day that I didn't call her, I would get that story the next call. So I'm learning this stuff, and I was at a workshop in San Francisco, and it was about 30 practitioners in the room, and the professor asked me randomly, he said, Dr. Tony, tell me about your mother. I'm like, okay. So I told him the story that I just told you, that I needed to call my mom every day. And immediately, my big toe on my right foot started to throb and to hurt. I was sitting down just like you are. I didn't hurt the toe previously or anything. And so he's asking me more questions about my mom and then helping me let go of some of this trauma. That day, when the class was over, I couldn't put pressure on my foot. It hurt to that point. And some friends helped me to my room and then to dinner. At dinner, one of the colleagues said, Tony, take your shoes and your socks off. And I did. And I put my feet like this. This toe was double the size that it usually is. And it was red and hurting a lot. So we made it back after dinner, back to my hotel room. They put ice, they put essential oils, they prayed about it and all that, but it was still painful. And finally I just told everyone to go, let me try to get some sleep. It was tough to sleep because even the sheet on my foot would cause more pain. In the morning I got up about 7 o'clock and I was still limping, but it had improved about 30%, but I was still noticeably limping. I go to breakfast, go to the class, and the professor, he says, did anyone experience anything after the session yesterday? And I raised my hand, and I told him about my toe situation. And he said, open your workbook to page 16 and read the conflict associated with the big toe. So I opened the book, first toe, second toe, big toe. And in the big toe, it said, conflict associated with the mother, with the obligation to do as she asked for. I'm like, wow. And then I read the other toes, and it had nothing to do with the brother. It was like the sister or the brother or the cousin or something, right? So, wow, what an eye-opener. And so the professor helped me let go of this. There's several techniques that we could do to let go of this trauma. It's sort of the stuff that we're carrying, right? The backpack of stuff. The lies that we believe. I still believe that it was the basketball coach that didn't let me become a professional player, in the NBA, but it's that Colombians can't jump. It was nothing about, the basketball coach. So, as he's helping me let go of this, the pain is going away. And so in the next break, I get up, and wow, it's okay now. And I'm like testing it out, right? And everything is good. And there was one of the colleagues there who's a rehab doctor. And he said, Tony, those injuries take weeks or a month to heal. I said, well, his name is Ulysses. I said, Ulysses, it's fine. It's totally pain-free. And so what happened after that? And to this day, my mom is 83. She lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I don't call her every day. And when I call her again, the next time I call her, she doesn't go there. She's like, oh, Tony, how are you? Thank you for calling. I'm having a good day or not having a good day, whatever it is. So somehow, me letting go of this, we free this from generational stuff. We might call it generational curses. In the Bible, and Jeff knows this much better than I do, is that we could inherit up to 3 generations of stuff, traumas and conflicts and maybe even curses. So what we do with what I'm presenting today and having a growth mindset will help our children and their children's children not succumb to these diseases and cancer. Because my dad had prostate cancer, that doesn't mean I will get prostate cancer. We're not doomed to have prostate cancer. But I'll change the lifestyle stuff, eating ice cream, watching the New York Mets growing up in New Jersey, or the Yankees, right? So changing our lifestyle, our nutrition, and so forth. But with all that being said, I believe that this is the most important thing that we could all do to maintain health and recover from cancer. Are you guys, because I'm from New Jersey, so I say you guys, are you guys with me? Yeah? And maybe as I'm telling you these stories, you're beginning to think about what your traumas are, what your conflicts are, the abuses in life. There's some patients that come and they say, no, Dr. Tony, my childhood is great. I grew up in Beaumont and everything is good. No problem. There's always something. We're humans. We have to take those layers off the onion and get to the core. And when we do this, we are free. We are free of disease. We are free of negative energy. And then we could thrive. And then we feel like we've lost a ton of weight. Right? Did anyone think about a trauma or a conflict or something big in their life? Yes. I won't pick on you, but if you have, don't let it just stay there. Work on it. Right? One exercise we ask patients to do is to write a chronology of your history. Start off when you can remember and write the stuff in your life. What are the things that you want to get off of that backpack? Because it was once said, buried feelings never die. We could say we took care of that, or it's in the back burner, or we've dealt with it. But until you really let it go, we are not free from that. Okay? Buried emotions, we have to bring them to conscious awareness and resolve those conflicts so that we don't get physical or psychological illness. I would like to challenge you that a lot of these psychological, psychiatric diseases that are occurring in our society and in our community and in our church are due to these suppressed conflicts and traumas that we've buried. The number 1, 2, and 3, probably the top medications by pharmaceutical companies and doctors are what? Antidepressants, antipsychotic medication, all these medications to affect our brain. Anxiety is becoming a big problem now in the world, right? And so we have to really go to that core of our emotions. So these unresolved, the good thing is that we all have mental emotional trauma, If left unresolved, cancer can take root in our body. Once we find the resolution and the letting go, then we can experience that healing. It's that simple, but it takes work, and some of us don't want to go there because I don't want to bring that memory back of that abuse, of that divorce, of whatever it is. But we should do it. We must do it. It started with Dr. Hamer in Germany. He was an oncologist, a very prominent oncologist in Germany, and his son was in the Mediterranean in a boat trip, and the kids were playing with guns, and he got shot accidentally. They flew him with a helicopter to the country of France, to Nice, and they started treating him. The father, this guy, he came there and stayed with the son for one plus month. They did multiple surgeries, and the son ended up passing away. Shortly after the son passed away, Dr. Hamer was diagnosed with testicular cancer. What are the testicles for? To make the sperm, right? So that it could fertilize the egg. So now that the son had passed, biologically the testicle formed the tumor because it wanted to produce more sperm to have the continuation of the species, right? And so Dr. Hamer began to think, is that a coincidence, or is there an association with my developing testicular cancer and the passing of my son? And he found a direct correlation because he went to the hospital where he worked on, and all the patients that had testicular cancer had the conflict of loss, L-O-S-S. They had lost someone. And then he went to the ovarian cancer patients, and it was the same. So any of you that have ovarian cancer or had ovarian cancer or know someone with ovarian cancer, the conflict of loss, L-O-S-S. Stillbirth, miscarriages, abortions, and it could be the mother or it could be the grandmother. But there's always, always the conflict of loss in ovarian cancer because these are biological principles. This is not psychological principle. And so Dr. Hamer started researching this and developed what he called the 4 biological laws. And they're too extensive to go over. And then he ultimately developed the 5th biological law, and they're all here, but I'll only talk about the first one, which he called the iron rule of cancer. And the iron rule of cancer, well, maybe I'll talk about the first 2. The iron rule of cancer states that there is a sudden, unanticipated, acute, traumatic experience which you are not ready for, nor do you have a solution to at the time that it occurred. A story. Growing up in New Jersey, we used to play tag. Remember tag? Right? We all played tag growing up. So my brother Chief, who is now a malpractice attorney in Florida, but his nickname is Chief, we were playing tag. I'm 4 years older than Chief, and his name is Carlos, by the way, but we call him Chief. So Chief is chasing his friend, and I'm about 30 yards behind him. They turned the corner, and I lost visual contact, and I heard, I ran as fast as I could. I turned that corner, and I saw a body on the ground with blood everywhere. This is a sudden, unexpected, traumatic shock experience that I did not have a solution to at the time that it occurred. My first impression, thought, was my brother. But as I regained my senses, it was the little boy that Chief was chasing. And so, of course, my trauma went down a little bit, but not too much, obviously. So fast forward the story. I'm at work, I'm at the clinic, and my office has a window that leads to the street. You know, it's by the street. So I'm in my office, I'm working, and I hear a car come to a sudden halt, and then I hear a bang. What happens? I go back. That's a trigger, and I go back to that instance of the little boy being dead. So my heart rate increases, I go on sympathetic overload, cortisol starts producing. I open the shade, to see what's happening, and it's a dog that got hit by a car, right, for example. Okay. So this is what happens if we don't resolve and let go of our traumas, that we get triggers in life, and then we go back to that state of conflict. So, and it goes back, as I said before, the psyche, the organ, the brain, and then that trauma will manifest as a disease in the corresponding organ. And what Dr. Hamer found is that in the brain, there are concentric circles that form. And then he mapped out the brain. This is a CAT scan, and he mapped with contrast, and he mapped out the brain, and then he found that this area corresponds to a particular part of the body, and that's where the cancer develops. So, Dr. Hamer started treating his patients with emotional healing, emotional work, without using chemotherapy or radiation. Remember, he's a big oncologist in Germany. 94% of his patients were cured. And I cured, C-U-R-E, they were cured from cancer. Doing this emotional healing work. But the authorities didn't like that because he wasn't doing chemo and radiation, and he was speaking about this. So they imprisoned him in Germany. And he was in prison for X amount of years, and finally they let him go. He moved to Spain and lived in Spain for a while, continued his research, and was going to be put in jail again. And from there, him and his now Spaniard wife moved to Norway, a bit, I think it's northeast of Oslo. And that's where he resided till he passed away about a year ago. I had the honor of meeting Dr. Hamer, spent 2.5 hours with him, and a brilliant man, but he was always, deemed a plaque. Radiologists and doctors will say that these concentric circles are artifacts, that they don't mean anything, but they do mean something. So he proved this scientifically. We don't do these CAT scans anymore because we don't need to do the radiation, but I showed you this to tell you that this was scientifically validated. And you can find this on the internet, and you'll find good things, real things, and you'll find the other side of, people putting this down because they don't want people to know about this. So why did only 94% of patients heal or cure themselves with emotional work and not 100%? There's something called secondary gains. Secondary gain is that some people with cancer, they don't want to heal. They don't want to be cured because now the husband is coming home from work at 6 and not at 11 after playing poker with his buddies. Or now the daughter that's in college is coming to visit them in every break that they have. And they're getting a gain from being sick. And I would encourage all of you, especially if you know someone or if you have cancer now, to assess your life, do an auto-reflection, and see if there are secondary gains in your life. And start working on them and letting them go. The secondary gain of Marcy was to marry me, but that must have been a good secondary gain, right? Because when she saw me in the room, helping Whitney, weeks later, she told me, hey, that girl is not good for you. And that was my girlfriend at the time that worked at the clinic. So she says that wasn't her, her reason for saying this. She just thought from the heart that this girl was not good for me and my career and so forth. But there might be some good secondary gains. But mostly we need to look at those secondary gains that are allowing us or you to maintain that disease state. So what happens with this work is that everything is going along well, and then we have that trauma, which we might call deep high stress. Dr. Hamer called it Ryke Hamer syndrome. We have that trauma where we see the little boy, or we get a divorce, or something happens, we get fired from work, or you lose money in the stock market, whatever it is. It's a sudden traumatic shock experience. And then we go into conflict, emotional, biological conflict, and then the cancer starts to develop. But really, when the cancer develops, and remember, I don't understand it all, but I've lived it so many times. When the cancer develops, is to save your life. The cancer developed to save your life. And this is why Lucinda can now come and play the piano. This is why now she values many things much more. This is why maybe, you're closer to Jesus, right? This is why we see the glass half full and not half empty. And this is why so many good things. And God has great things ahead for us, right? And this is why Sherry, who was given an A because she couldn't speak in public, she could come up here and minister and encourage and motivate you and many more people that she will going forward. This is why Marcy can stand up here and talk about Jesus. And this is why when Hope for Cancer, if Hope for Cancer stops being a mission, we're done. Because that's the purpose, and that's the reason for Hope for Cancer. Fortunately, I didn't need to get cancer to realize that, but my dad had cancer, and my daughter Whitney had cancer. And many of my patients that I love dearly, that have come through the clinic. So this is real, and emotional health is very important. The first thing to understand, as I just said, is disease has meaning. It shows to us externally what unbeknownst to us exists in the depth of our being. Disease has meaning. It shows us externally what unbeknownst to us exists in the depth of our being. What exists in our depth? What are the traumas? What are the conflicts? What are the negative thoughts that we have? What are the lies that we believe? That going forward from now, we can start letting them go and truly living a blessed life. Disease is the brain's best solution to keeping a person alive. It's a survival mechanism. So what do? This is fine in theory, Dr. Tony, and it sounds pretty good. We got to know it, we got to claim it, and we got to dump it. Right? So the knowing it is the what. What are these traumas? What are these conflicts? The claiming it is how is it affecting us? And the dumping it is bringing it to conscious awareness and letting it go. The iceberg that we showed earlier, bringing it from under the water to the top of the water, to conscious awareness. The Titanic didn't know what was under the water, right? When it hit that iceberg. And here's the iceberg that we just talked about and we saw. So bring it from what's hidden to the visible and dump it. Your neo-awareness is in fact the healer within. Just bringing this to conscious awareness will heal 70% of the traumas and conflict. So just the awareness is the healer, 70% of the times. Being aware is our first step towards a new life and towards becoming who we really are, a child of God. Your healing itself is not a reason enough. You have to have a motivating reason to heal. So one little thing I tell our patients is, in a book, in a notebook, not in an iPad or a computer, with a pencil or a pen, write 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 3 years, and 5 years. So I, Jim, in 3 months, I want all my bone metastases to be gone. In 3 years, I want to go to my grandson's graduation from kindergarten. In 5 years, I want to take that trip to Cancun to say hello to Dr. Tony and enjoy the beauty of Cancun and go to the Mayan ruins and all that. So we need a purpose to live. We have to have a reason to live. So this is a project purpose. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 3 years, and 5 years. Write it down. If a time comes, and maybe now 70% of the metastases are gone, not 100%, you put it down to the next time frame. And you continue focusing and going forward. It sounds trivial, but this is so important, and I've seen the impact of doing this so many times. Okay? Find the purpose project in your life. What do you want to accomplish? You need to have a reason to live. So this indeed is a different way of seeing life. And emotional healing presents a different way of healing. And as physicians, practitioners, we don't learn any of this in medical school or in training. It takes stepping outside the box. And all of you are here because you've stepped outside the box. Some of you may be a little more than others. Some of you are still incredulous. Alternative medicine, no. I'd rather go to MD Anderson. That's okay. That's your choice. We had a lady here who, in the first break, told me that she works at MD Anderson. I said, wow, thank you for being here. And she gave me a little present. I have it on my chair there. It's a stone that says love. And she said, what you're saying, I understand and I believe. And that's one of her purpose of being here, to have sort of, I don't know if it was confirmation, but, to hear it. So there is a reason for you to be here and to be stepping outside the box. This different view brings to light an understanding of who we really are from a biological point of view. It gives us access to a new level of awareness, facilitating a quantum leap in our understanding and healing. Typically, when someone gets better, they're like progressively getting better. But with this, we could have quantum leaps. We could get better quickly. Just like Phyllis's breast tumor, shoom, went like that. There's a doctor friend, he's a professor at University of California, LA, Los Angeles Medical School, and he teaches several classes there, and he has his practice in Santa Monica, California. And he had this patient from Israel who had prostate cancer. And Dr. Habib Sadeghi, my friend, he calls me and he said, Dr. Tony, I've been working on this emotional healing with a patient with prostate cancer, and he came in for a consultation today, and I went to do the digital rectal exam to check his prostate, and as I'm doing this, and we're talking about the emotional stuff and releasing it, I felt the prostate go like this. He says, I teach at UCLA. I know how to palpate. But still, he didn't understand it. So he told the patient to come back in a week or so to get a new PSA, to get a new ultrasound, and follow up, and everything was clear. So this is real. I could tell you many, many stories about this. The diagnosis of cancer is a trauma in itself. We call this the conflict of diagnosis or the conflict of prognosis. There can't be a bigger trauma than someone being told that they have cancer and or that they have X amount of time to live. That in itself causes aggravation of the cancer. How many times a patient goes to the doctor and they said, your scan shows that you have cancer. Well, we just need to verify this with a biopsy. And they ran into the doctor's office feeling great, eating well, sleeping well, everything good. And then they left the doctor's office shattered. Not only emotionally, but then their pelvis started to hurt because now they were told they have cancer. They began to have pains and all kinds of things. So just being told that someone has cancer or that they have a prognosis aggravates the cancer process, right? Information that you mentioned. So we have to ask important questions, and we have to dig deep. We have to be like Sherlock Holmes. And some of the questions we could ask are the following. What did you think about when you were told you had cancer? Did you see yourself in a coffin? Did you see yourself on top of, Mount Everest and declaring victory? What did you think about? How did you hear about your diagnosis? Were you home and the nurse called and said, by the way, Steve, you have lymphoma or stomach cancer, whatever. Who were you with at the time you were told? How were you told of this information? How did you react when you were told you had cancer? What did you hear from a medical viewpoint about your problem, your diagnosis? Did the doctor encourage you? Or the doctor gave you some grim prognosis? Right? What prognosis, here it is, did you make yourself? Do you believe the doctor? I don't wear white coats anymore, not even at the clinic. Because, there's that white coat syndrome, right? And it seems to be a barrier. I don't have a desk where I sit here. This is kind of a shield, right? And the patient is over here. I don't even have a table. I have love seats, and the patient is there. I'm here. There's a little table on the side where I have the charts with the computer, and that's what it's about, right? It's about connecting with your doctor. If you have a doctor that you're not connected with, run. Find someone that you can connect with, that can listen to you. What did you hear socially about your problem? Beaumont in this area is a tight community, as I understand it, And so what did your neighbor say? Oh, did your neighbor say, hey, Joe, years ago, there was some guy living here next door, and he had the same type of cancer as you did, and he died in 6 months, right? Or something like that. Or, hey, Joe, this guy had this diagnosis, and he's alive today, and he moved now to Cancun because he wanted to enjoy better weather, right? What was the story? What did you hear socially? Because all this is affecting your emotional health. So ultimately, where did that leave you emotionally after you ask yourself, and maybe you could go back to those questions and revisit them. And I would encourage you, if you haven't done that, Lucinda, to do that. Because there might be some things that we still have to let go. Right? So did that leave you, saying, yes, I could be victorious in Jesus' name, or, I'm doomed, right? So you have to find a solution that you can accept, whatever that solution is for you. And so, how to find the conflict? You have to create a life timeline from present and going back. Just get a piece of paper and write down what month and what year, if you could remember, the divorce, the failed marriage, to this, to that, all the traumas. Bring them to conscious awareness. You might cry, your heart might race, you might say, I don't remember. It's okay. I've been working on my stuff for over 3 years, and I'm only 30. No, but it's constant work. We need to bring these traumas and this conflict to conscious awareness. Research a timeline from 18 months prior to birth to first year of life. That's kind of difficult, right? What happened 18 months before you were born? Well, if your mother is still alive, you could ask her, or maybe an older sister, an older sibling. If you don't know, that's okay. Continue working on your timeline. And then a very important point is, when were you free from your parents, from food, money, and shelter? That you were totally independent. So let's say that was at 20 years of age and 6 months. Then you go 18 months up and see what happened in your life at that point. When were you free from food, money, and shelter? Let's say it was 20 years and 6 months. You go 18 months up and see in this time frame what traumas, what conflicts happened. And these exercises will help you recall these things, okay? I do these workshops that take about 5 hours, so I'm just giving you some tips, okay? Research your family tree. Build a family tree. And this is not to say who had cancer, who didn't have cancer. It's about the traumas and conflicts in your family tree, okay? So, we're almost done because it's getting a little warm here. It's not the situation, but the state of conflict that needs to be resolved. That conflict leads the way. It's that trauma, that conflict that needs to be resolved and let go of. So, the lies that we tell ourselves, are we like this, our head stuck in the sand? Are we believing lies? And if we are, let's start correcting them. What's your story? What's my story? It doesn't matter if you're 15, 16, or 85, or 100. What's your story? Write the story that you want for your life and make that your new reality. So oftentimes, if this line is the present, we're in the present, and we have the future in front of us, and the past behind us. And nowadays, most people are in the present, but they're focused on the past. They're like this, right? And then they just peek at the future, but they're focused on the past. So I encourage you to be in the present, learn from the past, do not stay in the past. Look towards the future. 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, 9 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, right? So in the present, looking to the future and writing our own story. Once the conflict is found, as I said earlier, you must let it go. So some little brief tips I could give you. Affirmations, scripture. Affirmations are very important. This one says, I acknowledge and accept my feelings. There is nothing wrong with whatever I feel. There are no good or bad emotions. Even if I feel anger or hate, there is always a reason for feeling it. Every emotion comes directly from the integrity of my spirit. So this is an affirmation that we could do every day and help release that negative thought. We must forgive ourselves. We must love ourselves. I think nowadays self-love is not as much as it was before. Right? People just don't love themselves. If we loved ourselves more, we would do more for our health. I believe that this pulpit and this church is of the Holy Spirit, is of God. And in how many churches is someone standing here talking about Doritos and talking about Cokes, or come here and put their Coke here while they're preaching? Let's start from the church, because in the church, it's a big voice, and people look up to the pastor, to the preacher. So let's give good examples of healing and wellness and well-being and nutrition. Carl Jung once said, whatever does not emerge as consciousness returns as destiny. So if we don't bring these traumas into conscious awareness, it will come back. And it will come back either as a cancer or a chronic disease or a heart attack or something. But buried feelings never die. So this is something called the butterfly tap. And it's very easy. We put our hands like this, either way, and I can have, you can get the script as a script, even if, and then you tap as you're saying this and filling in your own blanks. Let me tell you what maybe I'll put in the blanks. Even if I'm still very angry at the pharmaceutical FDA industry, I love and respect myself so much that it's okay for us to have clinics in Mexico because we can't do this in the States. I'm not going to be ill all my life because of these attacks and negative information and being called a murderer. I choose to let go of the grudge, the grief, so I forgive them and I release them in love. And if we do this 5 to 10 times a day, we are letting go of those traumas and those conflicts. And you fill in your own blanks. Oops, sorry, someone wanted to take a picture of that. Have anyone heard of Ho'oponopono? So it's a meditation type of thing. And while you say this, you're visiting every organ and every part of your body and every cell. To whatever is going on in me that is causing me to experience this situation, stress, disagreement, sadness, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. This is a Ho'oponopono, another affirmation. To whatever is going on in me that is causing me to experience this grief, this cancer, this divorce, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. Saying this 3 times a day during 7 days has scientifically been shown to increase your healing and to bring that sense of peace and relaxation. This is a friend of mine. Ours, maybe some of the older ones of us in the group remember the show The Nanny, Fran Drescher. And I can put this because she allowed me to, and she published this in Yahoo on June 15th of last year. Fran Drescher said, there's a poetic correlation between my rape and my cancer. So her story was that she was diagnosed with cervical uterine cancer 10 years after she was raped in a home invasion in 1985. So after she learned all this, she realized that the rape was directly correlated to the cervical uterine cancer, where the invasion was in that area. So every cancer has a biological trauma and conflict. Right breast cancer, male side, as we said with Phyllis. Left breast cancer is the mother-child, it's the niche, it's the nest. So everyone that has left breast cancer has an acute traumatic shock experience that they were not ready for, nor did they have a solution to at the time that it occurred, with either them as a mother to their child or them as a child to their mother. Okay. I told you about the bladder associated with territorial issues and cash flow. The urinary bladder is, the conflict there is marking your territory. So for example, for 30 years, your husband goes to work and he comes back at 6 o'clock, after work, and your home is your territory. And, even in the olden days, the men, we went out and we hunted and we gathered and we brought in to the wife, right? That's our biological nature. So now, the husband retires early, and now he's home all day. And the wife is like, this is my territory, but he's invading my territory. So she starts developing frequent urinary tract infections, or cystitis, bladder infections. And she goes to the doctor, who gives you what? Antibiotics. So then it gets better. 3 months later, hey doc, the cystitis came back. Oh, now we have to try this antibiotic. And it's continuously a vicious circle. It's related to the invasion of her territory. If that invasion is more complicated, and now the husband wants to cook, he wants to do everything, and the woman has nothing to say in the house, then that person, instead of developing a bladder infection, will now develop bladder cancer, because the trauma and the conflict is even greater. And the same thing with breast cancer. You can form fibrocystic breast disease or a breast tumor. And it has to do with the magnitude of the conflict, the deep, high stress, right? Stomach cancer, I mentioned. What is it in life that you cannot stomach? I know there's someone here with thyroid cancer. The thyroid is a gland that helps, obviously, in the metabolism and giving us energy and go. All patients that have thyroid cancer tend to be perfectionists. They have dozens of projects. They finish one project, but it's not enough. They have another thing to do and another thing to do. They have this one half done, this one half done. So the thyroid has to overreact, and it has to form a tumor to try to keep that person alive, because they're going to go crazy, because they never can, the thyroid is trying to say, slow down, right? Why do some patients with colorectal cancer develop liver metastasis, and others, they develop lung metastasis? What did the doctor say to them? They said, well, that's strange, because the colorectal cancer usually metastasizes to the liver first, and then later on to the lungs. It's because of biological conflicts. The liver has a different biological significance than the lung. The lung is like, right? And we come to this life with the first breath, and we leave this life with the last breath. So the reason that there's a lot of lung metastasis in cancer is because of the fear, and that when someone was told that they have cancer. Any other cancers you want me to talk a little bit about the biological conflict? Yes?
Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Lymphoma.
Hodgkin's.
Yeah, it doesn't, lymphoma, remember the lymph glands are to filter, right, to get rid of cellular debris. So what in life can you not filter or get rid of?
It was my son.
Sorry?
It was my son.
Was it? Okay. You want to tell us a little bit about that? No? Okay. So continue to do work on that, and if you want, you could email me, and I will help you, guide you through that, okay? But that is, see, she knows the conflict right away, so we could just go right there, and maybe other smaller conflicts will come up. So that's lymphoma. Throat cancer, anything here is, what in life could you not say? Did you have an overbearing father that you couldn't really speak up to, or you couldn't question him? And so, you can't talk. Why, Lucinda, when you had your diagnosis or you started feeling bad, what was like the first symptom that you perceived?
Brain fog.
Brain fog?
I couldn't concentrate.
You couldn't concentrate?
Talking and completely forget what I was saying, and seizures.
Okay. So the thing that you have to look at is what in your life caused you to not want to be there, right? The brain fog, that you're not really there, you're not focused. So why did back to what's wrong in your life? It's like, oh, that was so traumatic and, a lot of conflict that I just wanted to not be there. So the brain fogs up, and that's why that was your first symptom when you were diagnosed with the astrocytoma. Some brain tumor patients, their first symptom is that, they lose their equilibrium, their balance. Others is that they have headaches or they seizure. So depending on the first symptom, we could have information as to what, and guide us as healers, what the conflicts are. Okay? So just some ideas. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. And we're almost done. This is one of our thyroid cancer patients who wrote this. Don't use your energy to feed your past history. Use your energy to feed your destiny. And that's an example of what I said with being in the present and looking to the future. So steps to emotional healing is understanding every word that I said. No, just understanding the concept and knowing it, claiming it, building your timeline, dumping it, becoming aware of these unconscious, buried feelings, and then letting them go. You are the force that plays with your mind and uses your body as its favorite toy to play and have fun with. That is the reason you are here, to play and have fun. You are born with the right to be happy and to enjoy life. You are not here to suffer. When we had our twins, they were surrogate, they were in vitro babies, the doctor, he did everything in that petri dish to get the right nutrients, the right temperature, the right everything. But when he put Marcy's egg and my sperm there, that was all he could do. The rest is a God thing. That egg being fertilized is a God thing, right? So we were conceived, that conception, and now they have seen that in that moment of fertilization, according to research that's being done, there's like a spark, an energy that they're measuring now. So it's the Lord putting this together. So we're conceived in a spark of joy. No matter how tough your childhood was, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And what's in the past is in the past. Let's go forward. Don't believe what your doctor said, right, Lucinda? And thank you for being with me today. There's a number of references that we could get to you, but there's plenty of information on what I've said. And you don't have to understand everything. I don't. But give yourself that opportunity to go into what's buried and bring it out to conscious awareness, and then the healing to start. So, it's 3:30. I stopped right on time. Are there any questions, anything Dr. Brett or I can answer? Yes?
You said there are 96 patients that come in your clinic that's stage 4 cancer,
Yeah.
and you treat them as a patient. what do you do to treat their chemo and radiation that came in with chemo radiation? How do you detox them?
So 92% of our patients are stage 4, most of which have had chemo and radiation and surgery. The question is, what do we do to detox them? Number one thing to know is someone who has had these therapies are at least 6 months behind in cell health, cell function, and cell integrity. And remember, the cell is the basic unit of life. So the detoxing is what you saw: coffee enemas, nutrition, hyperbaric oxygen, juicing, saunas, emotional healing, getting them to exercise, improve lymphatic circulation, and so forth. And sometimes some supplements as well. Yes?
Once you talk about the multiple viruses,
Mhm.
you've got those 4 or 5 years.
So when someone has viruses, multiple viruses, what are the best ways to eliminate these viruses? Ozone, you know about ozone? Ozone is O3. It's 3 molecules of oxygen. And this is very important to kill bacteria, fungus, and viruses. So we do ozone intravenously, we do ozone rectally, and also remember the intravenous photodynamic therapy, the light therapy where we put the lasers in, that is using ultraviolet light. In the old times when chemicals were not available, they used to sterilize surgical rooms with UV light. So we use ultraviolet light to kill pathogens. This is called ultraviolet blood irradiation. Ozone and hyperthermia also. We don't use pharmaceutical drugs, right? But those are the main ones to kill viruses.
About how long does it take?
Sorry?
About how long does it take to?
How long does it take? Well, the patients are with us for 3 weeks, and then they continue therapy at home. So how long it takes, it's a hard question to answer, but it's an ongoing thing.
But it's 3 weeks at your clinic.
3 weeks at our clinic. Yes, sir.
How often and how long we perform the digital and the PSA test?
How often?
Yes, sir.
Well, without knowing all, your situation, we need to be careful with the PSA because it's not always a good marker. And the doctor who developed the PSA, he's a bit beside himself that it's now being used to do surgeries and to remove the prostate. So we should do the PSA every 3 months. Remember, all these tumor markers like a PSA, a CA-125 for ovarian cancer, a CEA for gastric cancer, CA-15-3 for breast cancer. These are all proteins or antigens, right? Prostate-specific antigen. So we need time, about 3 months, for it to be more accurate. So usually we like to do it every 3 months. However, we need to do other markers as well. In Florida, there's a lab called American Metabolics that does something else called cancer profile, and it looks at other markers in addition to PSA. They're in, I think, Delray Beach, Florida, American Metabolics, and they do a test called cancer profile. And then, of course, doing the circulating tumor cell that I discussed this morning is another test that I recommend. Never, ever just rely on the PSA to make therapeutic decisions.
It's been 16 years, so you're still testing the PSA. Is
Yeah.
it necessary?
Yeah.
You think?
Good?
Is it necessary to take?
Sorry?
Is it necessary to test more?
Well, I would do a circulating tumor cell, because at this point, if it's been that long, we need to see if there's any circulating cancer cells in the bloodstream. The PSA might not be. What was your last one?
About 4 months ago.
What was the number?
101.
0.01. So you had your prostate removed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so now the PSA, I wouldn't rely too much on that at this time. I would encourage you to do a circulating tumor cell count. Yes?
In your tour video, you talk about doing a daily enemas.
Yes?
What do you recommend? I mean, you said not laxatives, right?
Yes.
You can't do coffee at home.
So, a daily enema, we need to have coffee that is organic, that is caffeinated, and that it's unroasted, and it has high amounts of palmitic acid. So organic, unroasted, caffeinated, and high amounts of palmitic acid. And you could order that in San Diego. It's called Wilson's coffee, and this is not a coffee to drink. It has like a green tint to it. And the reason to use this coffee is because when you do the enema, that palmitic acid is absorbed in the rectal mucosa through the hemorrhoidal vessels and goes into the liver and starts like purging the liver and the gallbladder to detox. So the coffee enema is mainly a detox of the liver and the gallbladder, not so much of the colon. Of course, there'll be some lower colon detox, but more is for the liver and the gallbladder. So depending on your history, you can do 2 or 3 a week. If you have a history of constipation, then maybe start out with 1 a day for like a month, and then space them out more, like 2 or 3 a week. Yes?
Can you speak to glioblastoma? Have you treated that, or I think it's the emotion and treatment for it?
Glioblastoma in relation to the emotions and what is the treatment for it? Yes. So, like I was talking about Lucinda, we need to know with the brain tumor what were the first symptoms, right? So then we relate those symptoms to the emotional conflict. If it was slurred speech, right? So then we go into that and look at the relation to that, to the slurred speech, which is maybe in school you were told that you talk too much, be quiet, or that maybe, your first husband didn't really allow you to talk too much because he was overbearing and possessive, right? He wanted to do everything. So we have to look at what caused you to not be able to articulate as you would. And the treatment is a combination of many things that I talked about. And individually, we can give you a treatment plan and tell you specifically what the protocol is, but it would take me a long time now to answer fully that question. We have a patient, Aaron Robinson. He's a glioblastoma patient. Interesting story. I went to a seminar in Boston, and there were about 20, 25 of us, and I was the only one in left field. They were like, Harvard people, Mass General, and so the head of neurosurgery at Harvard and Mass General said that, and I told someone this story already, he said that in his mice studies, 100% of his mice were living with oncolytic viral therapy, like the Wrigley, right? But they use herpes simplex, which I wouldn't use because it's toxic. And then he said that 100% of his patients died within a year, independently with glioblastoma, independently of what the treatment protocol was. And so I asked him, I said, well, how many times have you done this in humans? Because you just said that all your mice survive with this treatment and all your human patients pass away. And he said, I haven't done it in any patient yet. And I said, why is that? He said, because we're only in phase 1 clinical trials. Right, so we have the oncolytic viral therapy, which I believe is what Lucinda's taking for her brain cancer, which crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's one of the challenges with brain tumor, is what can cross the blood-brain barrier. So there's a number of treatments that we have that are able to cross the blood-brain barrier. One of them is the Ryke oncolytic viral therapy that I mentioned. We now are also using the Sunivera, and there's a few others that cross the blood-brain barrier, including vitamin C IV at high dosage.
So just get her there, right?
Yes. Oh, a few questions. I'm probably not going to hear very well.
Just addressing pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic cancer? Yes. When Frank Drescher, the NAMI, invited me to speak at a conference in LA a couple months ago, my talk was on pancreatic cancer. And according to our latest statistics, if I remember correctly, we had a 63% success rate in stage 4 metastatic pancreatic cancer. One of our star patients, her name is Revi Lefvin, and she's in LA. She had the Whipple procedure when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that was part of the pancreas, part of the liver, part of many organs. And 3 months later, she felt pain in the area of the surgery, but the doctor at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles said, we just operated 3 months ago, everything is clear, you're okay. But she insisted, and finally they did new scans, and she had a recurrence to the surgical site, and now she had developed metastasis to the liver and 2 suspicious spots on the lung. The liver was biopsied, so that was confirmed to be metastasis. The lungs weren't biopsied, and they were suspicious. And they told her, we could give you some chemo, but for pancreatic cancer, it doesn't do much. So Revi's daughter, Tova, and her other daughter did the research. They came to us. They drilled me for about 2 hours because, they're Jewish, they're Hebrew. And I love them. They just wrote a book. I want to get you her book, Jeff. She's a Bible scholar, Ryke Hamer, and she just wrote a beautiful book about Jesus and the gospel according to Christian and also Hebrew perspective. It's a beautiful book. I've only read up to page 100 because it's kind of a little complex, right? And I'm a simple guy from a small village, so it takes me a little more time to understand these things. So Ryke is now 5 years, Mars, Ryke? I think Ryke is 5 years now of being free. And we have other patients with neuroendocrine cancer of the pancreas, and they're doing well. One of them is Adriana, and she's in Costa Mesa, California. And so far with her, it's been about 2.5 years. And she's fine. She still has a little spot there, but she's doing good. It's a tough cancer, as you know, but we have much better success than with conventional medicine that, for pancreatic cancer, there's not much.
What's the conflict?
Oh, the conflict. The conflict could be having a child out of wedlock, right? And also bitter and digestion. What can she not digest? Something that happened that it was like, why me, right? Why did my spouse leave and didn't leave a note? We had a patient, her name was Gwen, and she had highly metastatic cancer. It wasn't a pancreas primary, but it's a good example because she came to the clinic with her gynecologist, oncologist from New Orleans, Louisiana, and Gwen had very advanced cancer. The gynecologist, oncologist was like that, right, when I was explaining things. Anyway, Gwen was in total remission. A year later, 2 years later, and they were coming back every so often for checkups, plus doing scans in the US and New Orleans. And we've lost contact with Gwen, which was kind of strange because she was very punctual in her follow-ups. And months after that, she finally called us. They put me on the phone with her and she was crying. And I said, Gwen, what's up? They said, Doctor told me I have metastasis again everywhere. And I did a round of chemo because I didn't know what to do, and it spread even more. What happened is that Gwen's husband, who she had come from the very first consultation to the follow-ups, they met ballroom dancing. And to me, it was sort of like a marriage made in heaven. They go ballroom dancing, they meet, they come to the clinic, and they're lovey-doveys and all that. But one day she got home from work and all his clothes were gone, everything was gone, he had disappeared. And so the first thing that happened is she developed bone metastasis. or recurrence to the bone. The reason for that is because the bones, the skeletal system, is obviously to ambulate, to get from one place to another. But she was stuck. She didn't know what to do because her husband had left her, not knowing where he is, why he left, after so many years of marriage and being a stable, apparently stable relationship. So the bones, got the metastasis first. And so this is how we relate where the cancer goes according to the biological traumas. See, so many experiences and examples that I could give you. Marcy has had some interesting things happen with her with this work, with emotional healing, things that happened between her father and her mother that passed down to her, and she was freed of migraines when she did this work, right? Migraines that she had for many years, incapacitating migraines, gone, like that. It's interesting. Yes. Yes.
Is this in a book? Is this a book?
Is there a book?
Locations and where.
Yes. Go to recallhealing.com. This is one of our mentors, Dr. Gilbert Renaud, R-E-N-A-U-D, and the book is called Recall Healing. The website is recallhealing.com, and you could order the book, his book there. Mm-hmm. When you have this book, be careful, because if you're not trained, this can make you crazy, right? You start looking for everything, my big toe hurts, my this hurts, and, oh, I have all this, right? So, be careful. He didn't sell this book to people that were not trained, but I guess lately he has, and you can get it on the website now. Someone? Yes?
Does the conflict only pertain to like cancers, or does it pertain to?
I'm sorry. See, that's another gift I have from God. I have bad hearing, so.
Does the conflict only pertain to cancers, or does it pertain to other diseases like MS and those?
Does the cancer always pertain to cancer? Can it pertain to other diseases like MS? Remember, I gave the story of the cystitis, the bladder infection, right? When the husband retires and he comes home, and then the wife starts to develop recurrent bladder infection. So the answer to your question is absolutely. This is not limited to cancer. This is disease, emotional, and how it's related to any disease. My wife's migraines were gone, right? MS. Why is it that these people lose the ability to function in the way they lose? The innervation of the nerve and the muscles and those things, right? The demyelinization of the nervous system. So yes, and I don't know offhand all of them, because I work more in cancer, but for sure, there is a correlation with all disease.
What emotion did you say triggered seizures?
Sorry?
What emotion did you say triggered seizures?
Seizures? Seizures.
Either that or pain.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what seizures.
When cancer metastasizes to another part of the body, is the breast cancer metastasized to my spine, is in 22 years in between, is the spine, that's the part we're talking about that you would treat that instead of the breast cancer.
So she had breast cancer 22 years ago, right? And then now it's found to be in the back, in the bones. So what do you treat? Do you treat the primary conflict with the breast, or do you treat the back? We treat the acute problem first and find the conflict there, and then work back, and eventually you go back to the breast cancer, right? Sometimes that's called a lingering conflict, right? That wasn't resolved, and now it's affecting another part, and not the breast, but the back. A lingering conflict. Mm-hmm.